We're excited to host you tonight with Professor Saul, Neely, and our associates of the Flying University. So again, thanks for joining us. I also just want to thank the Student Alumni Association. They help provide some snacks and encourage some students to be here. So thanks to the Student Alumni Association. There are just so many amazing stories to share about UAS, and it's the mission of the UAS Alumni and Friends Association to keep alumni and our broader community connected with UAS. And it's also, part of our mission to highlight all these impactful and amazing things that are going on at UAS. So this is just serving as another platform for something amazing that's happening at UAS to share with our broader community. And then tonight there are two ways that you can support UAS. You can become, the first way is becoming a member of Friends of Alumni and Friends. And then the second is to support and contribute to our new Flying University fund that has just been created. So if you feel inclined or inspired to support UAS in any way, those are a couple ways, and I'll have an opportunity at the end to talk a little bit more about this new fund that directly supports the Flying University. But before we get started, I'd like to introduce Saul. A lot of you know Saul already, and it's been really wonderful to work with Saul. I haven't really had the opportunity to have a class of his or to work this closely with him, and it's also been a really great opportunity to meet some of the participants and students of the Flying University. It's just amazing to see all the passion surrounded around this. So I'm happy that we could share this with a larger audience. We also have our live streaming today. So if, people, you can go back and watch the recording of this presentation. And I don't have Saul's bio memorized, so I'm just gonna read it. A lot of you know him, but I think it just gives us a good understanding of where Saul where he comes from and why he started the Flying University. So Saul, he's the Associate Professor of English and Philosophy here at UAS. He teaches classes in critical theory, literary theory, philosophy, and as a citizen of the Cherokee Nation, critical indigenous studies. Saul completed his PhD in 2009 from Purdue University's Philosophy and Literature program. And he's also taught as an adjunct professor in Indiana State University's now defunct Corrections Education program. When he arrived at UAS, he came with the intention of getting back into the prisons and teaching. After 3 years of networking within our community, that opportunity finally presented itself. And in 2012, he started work on building what has become now the Flying University. This initiative has grown over the 6.5 years and has become an embedded aspect of prison life inside Lemon Creek. And this initiative also has become just a re-entry effort here in Juneau and across the state. And tonight we're here to celebrate and develop this endeavor with your help. So again, thank you for being here. I'm gonna turn this over to Saul, and he's gonna give you a little bit more background on how he started the Flying University. So thanks, Saul.
Thanks. Thanks for showing up on a Tuesday night. Here it is. I really appreciate it. It's a kind of a awkward evening of the week, I know, to have an event like this, but this room is booked for the next 3 days and then spring break and all of that. But I want to thank Jesse and Shauna O'Sullivan and over there and Lynn Johnson and for all the incredible help setting this up. The Flying University is unique among prison education programs, as far as I can tell, in the nation, because we became a reentry effort. And that's just because of the way our community works. It's a small community. People are incarcerated, they get out, they know some of the outside students that I bring in. And for that reason, as we've become a reentry effort as well, getting these resources together so that people can try to take college credit classes inside the prison with me debt-free, or they can get out of prison. And if they want to try UAS, they can do that. We're building these resources to help that kind of reentry effort as well, so that we can provide scholarships for a couple classes a semester, some help with housing, some help buying books, these kinds of things, so they can give college a try and learn if it's for them or if it's not for them. Again, without going into debt. I can't ethically bring these folks into debt. So I want to thank Jesse, Shauna, and Lynn for all their work in helping set this up. It's a phenomenal opportunity. I couldn't have done it without them. I also want to thank the students who are helping us tonight. Thank you all for assisting us. I want to thank Gloria Media Services, our panelists here, including KJ over there. And I've really, because of all of this work that Jesse's and Sean have been setting up, I've had a number of speaking engagements this semester, which have been really nice, including an hour-long interview with Elaine Schroeder. And so I have to do this. I have to give a shout out to my daughter, Neely, who is watching on the YouTube channel right now. She can't be here because it's close to her bedtime, but I promised her a shout out. And we're also doing a thing. I believe everybody got a little piece of paper as you came in. We're going to do a Wordle experiment. We're going to ask in one word, what is necessary for a healthy community to thrive? So we're going to fill that out, and then they're going to put that into a Wordle, and at the end of the event, we're going to see what the word cloud looks like. So that should be fun. The title for the event tonight is Courage for Community, Dialogues on Hope in Higher Education Inside Alaska's Prisons. I titled it Courage for Community because right now our political moment is characterized by fear. And it's really tragic. We have scapegoating, we have fear of immigrants, we have fear of, just so much fear of college professors, right? Anti-intellectualism is rampant. I worked really hard with a bunch of community members, many of whom are right here on SB 91, and that's being reversed, right? In part because of fear. It's not based off of anything it's not based off data, it's not based off any evidence, it's simply emotional and ideological fear. And so I teach my intro to philosophy class, and we always start with Cornel West, who says that courage is the enabling virtue for any philosopher. Courage to think, courage to hope, courage to love. And so I think about that in terms of community. To really pull together as a community in the way that we need to, it does require courage. I remember one time I had actually it was with Ricky Analino and KJ and David Katsy. We met with Police Chief Johnson, right? Bryce Johnson. And we met with him about developing policies for body-mounted police cameras. And he was talking about how his first priority was to protect the community. And it became really clear to me that what he meant by community was you incarcerate a bunch of people and whoever is left over is community, as opposed to thinking that the people incarcerated inside our prisons are our neighbors and our friends and our family members, that they are, in fact, our community member. And so thinking about courage for community in that way. Tonight, we're going to host a community dialogue in 3 acts. We're going to talk about inside perspectives. And my friend and colleague, Kendall Newman, is going to help talk about inside perspectives. And then we're going to do outside perspectives with Kevin Jones, Will Geiger, and Ricky Analino. Blake Fletcher is supposed to join us, but he's not here. Somebody wants to text him, go ahead. Blake is not here, right? Okay, I'll text him in a minute. And then community advocacy perspective. KJ Metcalf is going to join us. He's been very generous with the Flying University funding. Him and Peggy have funded a couple of the Flying University scholarships that have allowed students to take my classes for college credit. And then we have Christina Love and Rosie Ainza, so they'll join us. And we're going to do this sort of talk show style. So once you come up and you're part of the panel, just stay part of the panel. To get us started, I pulled together clips from the Flying University documentary that was produced by Scott Burton from KTOO, because they showcase sort of inside perspectives about on the flying university. So I think probably we can begin with that. Yeah, and it's about 13 minutes, so we'll stay on track. Sound good, everybody?
Yes.
Okay. Rocking good news.
A lot of people are here for a long time, a lot of people are here for a little time, and we're still people, we're human, you know. I mean, it's not like we're any worse or any better than anybody else that comes along in here, you know.
Nice money, guys.
We wanted to start teach courses in philosophy and literature to the inmates. I wanted to bring students inside with me.
When the program started and the students from the community came in, it just was like instant electricity.
You can see it. Sure.
Yay.
Next thing you know, I'm getting acceptance letter from UAS. I'm like, wow. I have it plaque up on my wall. Like, I'm going to school. I'm going to school, you know.
People need to know that the people out there want them to do well. And these guys, a lot of them have figured out that nobody cares. So if it's one person says, hey, you can do it, fine.
We don't want to just re-enter people back into the community. We want to get them back into the community in a strong, healthy, and supported way so that they do not recidivate.
Inspired by programs such as Inside Out happening in the lower 48, Saul Neely, a professor of English at the University of Alaska Southeast, began bringing students into Juneau's Lemon Creek Correctional Facility in 2012. Among the class's procedures is to have students moderate. This week's leader is Christopher Paul Gonzalez.
It looks like we are being recorded, and I mean, it's not like it's something new. We got cameras everywhere inside here. I guess we'll just go with the flow. I've been taking the class for about 3 years now, ever since pretty much I missed the first one, but then everyone after that. We've been doing a lot of different types of classes, like we did Othello, like we're doing right now. We've done existentialism, the study on that. We've done literature born on struggle, the V for Vendetta, that was a good one.
Iambic means it's an accented, you see 5 meters, so there's 5 feet. So you say the rod that smiles, steals sun and from the thief, right? So you see what I'm saying? That's one line of poetry, right? See, the rod, unaccented accent. The rod that smiles, steals something from the thief.
The class is studying Shakespeare's Othello. Among the day's activities is reading lost scenes or fictitious scenes that the students have composed themselves.
Man, remind me to never piss you off because you got some serious issues for real. But I like it because you're keeping it real too. And just looking out for your set and your little homies. We gotta jet and see what plays out with these 2 cats later days.
From liberty, fasting, and prayer, much castigation, exercise, devout. For here is a younger and sweating devil here, that commonly rebels, 'tis a good hand, a frank one.
You may indeed say so, for 'twas that hand that gave away my heart.
You know, people look at Othello and they're like, wow, he changes so quickly, and like that jealousy and sickness take hold of him so fast. But really, like, you know, having come out of this very brutal war and coming home to a new wife who he's probably known for a much shorter time than Iago.
Back in prison, Neely arranged for Catherine Woodkey to join the class. She's a professional actor playing Desdemona in Perseverance Theater's production of Othello.
How do you, Desdemona?
Well, my good lord,
Give me your hand. This hand is moist, my lady.
I felt no age, nor known no sorrow.
This argues fruitfulness and liberal heart. Hot, hot.
The guys that are going to the class, they enjoy it a lot and they seem to get stuff out of it. It's fun because if they'll take like one, usually what happens is they'll come in, they'll take all the vote tech classes they can get. And then they discover that Paul and I aren't so bad. So then they'll start to take the other classes that are more the social type classes. And that's good because they learn how to talk to people, because they forget how to do. I mean, they'll tell you that themselves, it's like, how do you interact with women when I haven't seen really any women? Even, COs, you don't react the same way or, have the same type of relationship you would with somebody that you see on the street or, things like that. So it's good that they have that interaction. I think it's the soft skill things that they don't learn or forget about, but most of the time I think they probably haven't learned them. That stuff gets integrated into it, and then maybe they'll go to college. We've got guys that were in here and now going to college full time. Because I'll help them do the FAFSA, the applications and things like that too. So.
Hey, you take me and teach me how to grow food and everything, and then my grandson comes and kills off the other.
Yeah.
She's still like, she gets wrinkled and she's still like, you have some things to say. And I was like, just so you later, now she's dead, or she's dead now.
So is the audio heavy?
Yeah, it's like, it helps them out like stage the whole thing, when we seems out to be this murderous, corrupting, person, but all along he's helping them go along with their scheme, with their plan. He lets us run the show. You seem like when we're in there, I was the moderator, the person that comes in and leads the group. I mean that's a great thing right there, all on its own. Just as well as the students that do come in, they participate just as much as we do. And you've seen, I forgot his name, the one that was talking about his play and then how he performed the pirate play. I mean, us getting a little piece of that, I mean, that's great. Being able to see that as humor, that's something that I'm gonna laugh about when I go back to the line.
Right at that moment, Cassio and 40 other of these guys come up. Cassio's like, "What up, bitches?" Comes in, 40 guys, they save the day, and it's basically, Iago's like, "Okay, so what were you gonna say?" He's like, Othello says, "Nothing, just that we waited around for a long time."
This stuff is good. It brings people in that normally would not come in. They can see that they're just like everybody else, the guys that are in here. I mean, the guys that in here did something bad, but there's guys in here that were good until they were 35, 45 years old and made one mistake, and that was a big mistake, and now they're in here for a long time. So it doesn't, one bad decision can just screw your life up big time, and it's not just your freedom that you lose. You lose your housing, you lose all your stuff that you had, your clothes, your family, your dog, whatever you had, it's gone. So imagine all that stuff gone. You're in here for 2 or 3 months. Somebody goes and cleans all your stuff out. You get out. Now you don't have a house. Now your family doesn't want anything to do with you. All your possessions, from silverware to books to whatever you had, you don't have that anymore. And you're supposed to get out and get a job and meet your PO and go to drug and alcohol class and be good and not be stressed. And if you're stressed, learn how to not be stressed so that you don't really want to go back and drink, because that's not a good idea, because that's what's got you in here in the first place. Yeah, not stressful at all.
Got out, and then, it's like my first experience, realizing what it is to be a felon. Go apply at every job possible. Think that, I have a good resume, but once you check that felon box, it's like, it don't matter what your resume looks like. Once you check that felon box, people are automatically assume, what kind of person you are.
I really look at this as a shared responsibility, that it's shared with, first of all, the inmate. Certainly, the inmate has to take responsibility for their actions. But then we have to have a responsibility in DOC to make sure we give them opportunities to improve those behaviors, to deal with the aspects of their life through, trauma in their lives of being raised in an alcoholic home, victims of child abuse, poor education, whatever the case may be. We have an opportunity and I think a responsibility to help build up those deficits so that they can be successful. And then the final part of the responsibility is the communities. Again, communities have got to help us and help the inmate have a smooth transition back, because again, they are from these communities, they are members of these communities. This is where they most often grew up and lived and went through their lives.
I would like to say that I would like for it to get better. I mean, in ways that it can get better, is just for it to keep going, for them to keep coming in, I mean, people from the university, for Saul, introducing new classes that are available on campus as well as in here.
Right now, I think it's worth noting that the program costs no money. It's all volunteer. So there's no tax burden or anything like that. What I would like to see in 5 or 10 years, the Flying University become is a prison education program that actually awards university credits. That would be a tremendous achievement, I believe. And we do have some support for that on campus and with our administration. These guys, right now, they get certificates of completion. Some of them are designated with distinction. It goes into their files, and if they need a letter of recommendation from you, they have to do it for their parole board, or for the guys coming out of UAS, they just wrote a letter of recommendation for one of our guys just this week. So I can give that kind of incentive, but if they can get college credit, I think that would be even more meaningful for their lives.
We know that education is a critical component of successful reentry. That education is one of the most critical pieces. If they do not have education and skills to be able to go back out into the community and compete, then they're most likely going to fail.
The Flying University is unique in the state, and it's because of the resources available in Juneau. Those resources vary in the communities that house the other dozen correctional facilities, and their educational programs should reflect those community strengths, whether they be vocational, academic, or otherwise.
It's hands, not hearts.
I cannot speak of this. Come now, your promise.
What promise, Chuck?
I sent to bid Cassio come speak with you.
I have a salt and sorry rhythm. A friend offends me, lend me thy handkerchief.
Neely says his work with the Flying University is fulfilling, but there is something more.
The first thing we have to do is completely reimagine how we understand justice. I mean, that's the heart of it right there. We need to think about justice not in terms of retribution, but something that is more along the lines of restorative justice. But even restorative justice is difficult to talk about with some people, because what is it that you're restoring? There was nothing there to restore in the first place. It's hard to talk about rehabilitation if some people have never been habilitated. We had one young man who was a participant in the Flying University who published a poem in our first publication of poetry written by inmates. And it's a heart-wrenching poem in which he talks about his father locking him inside of a freezer just to see if he would freeze, or to throw him against the wall to see if he would break. In fact, in Vermont, I read this poem out loud, and here I am in front of an auditorium full of people, and I could barely hold my tears back. I mean, every time I read this poem, it just really wrenches at my heart. How do you rehabilitate somebody who's never been habilitated? So I think fundamentally reimagining how we understand justice is the first thing that the community really needs to do.
All right, those are some. Yeah, and one of the things I really like about what Scott Burton said toward the end, this is where we'll invite Kendall up here, is he talked about what's unique about Flying University, and because of the community it's situated in, which is Juneau, of course. But one of the things we're excited to announce tonight as well is the creation of a statewide effort called LION, Learning Inside Out Network. And Kendall Newman, Sadiq has been a part of that enterprise with me, and we are networking with a program she was a part of at Fairbanks Correctional Center called Area 111X. Do you want to join us, Kendall? Since we're not mic'd up, we could just start the panel. Maybe you could just talk a little bit about Area 111X, and also Kendall just started. Sorry, real quick. Kendall is from UAF. She works with eCampus. She's also teaching a graduate class on digital storytelling right now. So it's been great networking with Kendall. She's really incredible. But thinking about, she just started a women's writing workshop inside Lemon Creek this week as well. So you want to talk about that?
Yeah, we just started. So there haven't been, so Flying University's been around for what, 9-10 years?
6.5.
6.5. Inflating your numbers. Feels longer. It's established. And there hasn't been an opportunity like that for women at Lemon Creek and in that amount of time. So there's close to like anywhere, 20 women incarcerated at Lemon Creek and more like 200 men. And they share, any classroom or like recreational space is shared. And they can't mix the genders. So if you're going to offer a program and you want students that are going to do college level work, you're going to get more students who are eligible for your program if you're offering it for men, because there's more men. So there's often not programs for women. So we just, and it's me and Rosie, is it Ainsa or he said it differently? Ainsa. Me and Rosie started a writing workshop for women at Lemon Creek. And our first class was 2 weeks. I didn't even tell you this. Our first class was 2 weeks ago, and we had 8 women come to class, and we spent an hour and a half. And, I was saying we would be successful if we had 2 women show up, and we stayed for an hour and a half. We had 8 women. We read some poetry. We did some writing in class. They got notebooks. They went back. I went in for our second class on Monday, and we had 15 women, which is all the women that are incarcerated at Lemon Creek right now, which is amazing.
Yeah.
So it's just, it speaks to the need for this type of thing and the desire for it. And we were in there for 2 hours talking about poetry, bantering with the education coordinators, and just offering a different atmosphere that is like intellectual and academic and yet still playful and accessible. Which is what Flying University does too.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Mm-hmm.
And real quick, could you describe Area 111X and how that's structured? Because it's different.
Yeah, Area 111X is different. So I came down to Juneau last summer after being in Fairbanks for a number of years. And while I was in Fairbanks, we had a women's writing workshop up in Fairbanks that's been around now for almost 4 years. And for about a year, we've had Area 111X, and that's offering Writing 111X, which is a GER at UAF. Is it the same designator here?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a GER. It's sort of a gateway course. And we in Fairbanks are offering that course for credit inside Fairbanks Correctional Center. And taking this, and that actually came out of my position at UAF eCampus as an instructional designer. UAF eCampus used to also be distance education and offer correspondence courses. And so it was actually providing higher education opportunities inside jails and prisons across the state through mail. But for a number of reasons, one being that it's not the best way to learn, they stopped offering those courses. And when UAF stopped offering paper-based courses, a lot of people lost access to higher education in the jails. So this was an effort to put that access back in place. But we're calling it like a hybrid learning approach. And it's a it's hard to explain actually. I mean, it's much like Flying University in that it's a college level course. There's, but it's because Fairbanks Correctional Center is a jail and not a prison, and people rotate through more, it's put into smaller bite-sized chunks so that people can join the course, do a part of it, be gone for a while, come back, do more of it, get out, finish the course outside, and get credit and get access to the university that way. So again, like it said when LC wasn't up here, responding to the context of the community you're in. So that's a program that's really designed for the context of a temporary facility.
Yeah, it's pretrial facility.
Pretrial facility.
Yeah, excellent. Yeah, and you know that documentary is a few years old by now, because last semester and the semester before I was able to offer college credit, so that was really exciting. 2 semesters ago it was Philosophy 201, 4 students got credit for that, and then this semester it was Writing 111. 5 students enrolled. 1 ended up in the hole, but 4 successfully passed. so you know, that's not bad. 4 out of 5. Yeah, so yeah, maybe we'll sort of keep this conversation going and bring in some outside perspectives. I want to invite Blake Fletcher, he's here, yay, and Kevin Jones and Will Geiger and Ricky Analino to join us on the panel. I actually have some questions for y'all. Yeah. Blake was, yeah, these are Flying University rock stars here. Right now, the seminar topic this semester is Philosophy of Community, and that's organized around a direct independent study I'm doing with Kevin. And then Will Geiger is longtime ally of the Flying University. I just like to say that the first time I ever stepped foot in a classroom at UAS as a professor, Will was in that class as a student. So I've known Will since I've moved
that was
here.
my first class.
Yeah, that's rad, right? And then Ricky Analino, most everybody knows Rick. He's well networked person in the community. He's got a crazy awesome story. I love to get together with him and just hear some of his crazy stories. But in the prison, he's affectionately known as OG. Everybody called him OG for a long time, and then one night he was talking, and he's like, "I don't know what OG means," and I was like. He said, "I think it means old guy." I said, "No, it means original gangster." And Rick said, "Oh, I am Sicilian." And then Blake Fletcher is a great ally of the Flying University. He was our first Flying University intern last spring semester. And as part of his internship, he started an oral history of Flying University. So he did interviews with inside students, outside students, some of our guest faculty who've shown up, Robin Walls, Ernestine Hayes, Emily Wall. And so, yeah, we're very grateful for that. So I wanted to ask you all, and if you forget, the questions are behind you. I didn't think that they would be behind you though. But just maybe sort of talk about how or when did you participate in Flying University? Do you have a particularly memorable moment? How did the seminar impact you? And what do you want others to know about your experience with Flying U? And we can start with Kevin. We don't have to necessarily go in order. This is a panel discussion.
So I started with Flying University last semester. It was the first time I went in. I was in one of Saul's classes, and he was asking for volunteers. And I just think this is the place we live, and it's important that our community, that we know our community and be a part of the community. And you know, thinking about the prison, it's like that's something that I don't know anything about. We actually have a family member who went to the prison system because of something stupid that was done. And I thought, this is important. So I started going in last semester, went in was very apprehensive because I had no idea what I was walking into. And when you walk into the prison and, you know, the security checks and then the door slams, the gates, boom, this gate opens, this gate closes, and you go up. And I think last semester we had 12 inside students. And you walk into this room and there are 12 men and very, very diverse. You know, some things that we consider, you know, hate symbols tattooed on their bodies and things. So, but I quickly realized how anticipated us coming in there was for them, and what an amazing opportunity, and how grateful they were that we were actually taking the time to go in there and be with them. And that's like, wow, these people. And then you start talking and you become friends with these guys, and every time they see you, I was amazed they remembered your name. So here, all these people, and they knew every one of our names after the first time. And they don't feel like they're part of the community. They feel very, very externalized and like nobody cares. And you hear that a lot of times. Well, nobody really cares. And so the preparedness of everything, the intensity with which they go through what we're doing is just, it's amazing. And, you know, last semester was the first time that I knew about that they were getting credit. And it wasn't just the 5 or the 4 that were actually getting credit, but when they actually completed the course and everything, every single one of those 12 guys was excited because it was something, you know, that life-changing for them. So and I'm going in again this semester. It's just an amazing experience.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Yeah. And I started going into the Flying University the first semester. You said it's been 6.5 years now, so it must have been the first 4 that I attended, because I haven't made it to the last 2.5 since I started working full time. But yeah, a lot like what Kevin said, the joyfulness in the classroom is something that I've always really been, first of all, struck by, but then it made me want to keep returning. And to do away with the conception that is there sometimes, even though we explicitly cast it aside that we're going in to help these people, but it's a communal learning experience. But it would always be a really invigorating intellectual exercise, no matter what the readings were, which were often, you know, very diverse and very complex, but everyone would get really deep into the material as if it were a class at any university, and people would be held to relatively high standards, which I think is part of what Saul's trying to do with an experience for college preparedness that a lot of people haven't experienced before. Couple positive experiences I can recall. One was like in the video, I was wearing a yellow shirt that we affectionately termed Solidarity Yellow. But one time they were doing their count and they accidentally counted me. And they really threw off their numbers and told me I couldn't do that anymore. And then another time Saul was out of town. I think he went to present at a conference or something. So I actually got to lead the course. And I don't remember what the material was, but we were going into the first, right outside where the barbed wire fence is. And they asked who I was, and I don't remember exactly what I said, but once they asked if I had my credentials, and I said yes, but I didn't. I don't know what they were looking for. And then they opened the door, and I was like, I think they bought it. I don't remember what they said, but they're like, hey, what was that? Over the loudspeaker. Went in, it was a great class, and there's an atmosphere of like sort of playful, but I'm not quite sure the best terms to put it in. playful, humorous solidarity. Like they would give me a really hard time when I was standing in as a substitute teacher, but it was in a really uplifting, friendly way where they're making jokes at my dispense in a way that tells me we're here for you. And so just those really human connections, but also just for even my own personal benefit from engaging with the material. It's every class I've attended has been really enriching.
Well, I'm a lot older than most of these guys, so I was the generation where people didn't wear tattoos, you know. And at my first class I went in and people were really covered in tattoos, and I didn't know about that. Wow, what is? And within the third class, I didn't see any tattoos anymore. I saw people. It was very emotional for me to see that film because I know all these guys very, very well, and I have great affection for all of them. And when people get out, I walk a lot, and so I meet people. And I met one guy who participated fully in the class, and I took him out to lunch, and I try to do that, just connection with the community, because if people are our community, whether people wanted to say that, but those folks are very much part of my community, emotionally, in every other way. And he said, I'm from Kodiak, I'm a fisherman, and I'm walking, I don't even know, they just dropped me out here. I'm in a halfway house, but I walk around, I don't know where I'm at. And by the way, I can't read. And I said, have you ever been able to read? And he said, no, since a little kid. So I was gonna connect him with special ed services and stuff, you know, local rehab, but he already was. And he participated in that class fully because folks in that community read to him and explained to him so he could understand, just like anybody else with a disability. He functioned fully. I had no idea he couldn't read. And can you imagine how scary it is if you can't read? Your brain doesn't do it. See, I coordinated the FAS clinic and I worked with Jamie. I was on the board for many years. And so I knew a lot of people in jail. And I know the hardest guys, some of the hardest people who go there because they don't understand what's happening. And it's very emotional to see that there is a beautiful community there. It's a very harsh environment. It's not an easy environment, but they told us the first time, the first class was the most powerful for me. They all have been powerful, of course, but they said, anyway, I'm getting a little emotional here. But after they said, this is something like I would describe as a sacred space. That's how I describe it. It's a sacred, we're safe here. You guys share with us like you heard. You share with us, we share with you. We have a level of respect and affection and we care about it. We know we all care about each other. We don't get that in here. It's a scary place, this place. And at the last, I told you about the tattoos, you know, in my generation. Mm-hmm. And at the last one, they said, you guys are special to us. And they started pulling up, they can't take their shirts off. So they would pull them up, show us the tattoos, explain what the tattoos meant. And all of a sudden it became, this is art, like stained glass windows telling us what my life is about. And it had a whole different, and I met a man in Fairbanks, his body was 96% or 94% covered in tattoos, he said, and some of you who are there know what I'm talking. And he got through some basic education, and he said, my mom was a pusher, my dad was a pusher, my mom was a prostitute. I didn't know people didn't sell drugs. I didn't know anything about this. And I came to prison and I got him educated and I began to understand something, which was what you were hearing here. And they lifted up their shirts, and you were there when that happened. Were you there when that happened? I'm not sure if I was.
It was last semester.
You were there, obviously. And it was unbelievable. I mean, but this was a soul-to-soul experience. That's all I could tell you. And so I'm very connected. And I've been in every class there is, I go, I enroll in there, because this is a special part of the community I want to be a part of.
It's hard to follow OG Rick. So the first time that I considered going into the Flying University was Saul's English 215 class. And so English 215 is kind of a big deal. And when you get into the philosophy behind literature and you get into looking deeper and ways of actually reading so that you can be moved by the literature that you read. And Saul offered to us one day, actually, it was almost more like a plead, you know, like, and I could hear the passion in his voice, and he said, hey, I have this opportunity for you. And this opportunity would entail you to have a time commitment on Friday afternoons. You're going to need to come in. You're going to need to have done some extra reading. You'll get a second look at a lot of the literature. I'll write you a letter of recommendation. Here's the opportunity. I would like it for you to come and participate in the class that I teach in the prison. And for me, I didn't hesitate. I raised my hand before Saul had even finished describing what this would entail. And I said, what time on Fridays? I want to see if I have class. And so the reason I was so quick to make that leap to go ahead and do that is because my dad was in prison for a little bit while I was a kid, for actually quite a large chunk of my childhood. And the thing about my dad was that he suffered a tremendous loss right in front of him. He was in a car accident. His best friend died in his passenger seat of his car, and he was driving. And it was on my first birthday. So my dad was 18 years old when that happened, and he fell apart. He told me sometime along that at some sort of a get together with friends, somebody offered him some sort of a substance and he didn't even remember what. And he tried it. And his friend just said, it'll make your pain go away. It'll make it so that you won't have to think about these things anymore. And it stuck. And it only really takes one time sometimes for it to really grab hold of somebody. But that's not why we're here today. What we're here today to talk about is why I wanted to do that. And so my dad, when he got out, he worked really hard, and he raised me to respect every person that I meet and never to assume that I am better than anybody, because we all have struggles and we all have flaws. And one thing in particular he taught me is that we all make mistakes. We share that in common. We all make mistakes, and the severity of those mistakes vary. I asked my dad one day, what was the best days for you in prison? Like, what was the best part? And I was hoping for kind of a selfish response when I was a kid. I thought he would say, you coming to see me, of course. But what he actually said was different. He said, to be honest, I think you want me to say you coming in and visiting me, but those were the hardest days. And he said the easiest days were the days that people would come in and play Monopoly or checkers or have a book club or teach a class or have a religious service or those types of events, because in those moments he encountered strangers, but those strangers would look him in the face, and those strangers would look him in, they would meet his gaze, and he said it made him feel human. And so what I thought Saul was offering me was the opportunity to go and maybe try to make some other people feel human that could use that in their lives. But what I got out of it was a tremendous amount more than I anticipated, because Will Geiger was there, and Saul Neely was there, and OG Rick was there. And every day when we showed up, it was like some sort of a holiday, because you walk in and you get dapped up in hugs, and you get like the largest hug from the largest man I've ever seen. That kind of hurt, but it also felt good because I knew he was hugging me that hard because he cared. And so I had so many supports from that class, whether it be to engage with the literature in a deeper level and to ask questions and get perspectives that I would never otherwise be able to get. And like I said, with Will being there, this guy is a pretty smart dude that has done some serious reading and committed some time to thinking about these things like Saul has. And to be able to ask him questions on the side, hey, I have a misunderstanding, And then to have that be a part of a group discussion with people who had different opinions than me, I was able to learn. And so that's not what I anticipated. I didn't anticipate I was going to go in there and learn. I thought I was going in there and doing a service to these people, and honestly, they did a service to me. And I'll share one more experience with you before I pass this on, because I don't want to hog the mic. But the first day of that class, I think somebody else said this earlier, was kind of overwhelming. I was sitting in the parking lot, and I'd spent a fair amount of time in my childhood visiting a prison every Thursday to see my dad. And I was like literally shaking in my car, and I was looking at the gates, and I was just like reliving memories that I don't want to think about, and walking through those gates, walking through the sliding gates to get in there, the very ones that Will almost had his credentials checked at. Walking through those gates, like my mind was flooded with emotion and feelings that I had suppressed since I was probably 10 or 12 years old. And then I got up to that class. We go through the metal detectors and emptied our pockets out, and we finally get up there, and I made sure to sit down in between two inmates, because my goal was to look some people in the eyes, and the people that needed to look good or to look in the eyes, I thought were the inmates, the inside students. And the two guys I sat between were Jeremy Fish and Cole Dupuis. And so we end up getting into a breakout discussion, and we're sitting together. And before we could even get into really deeper level introductions, aside from here's my name, Cole leaned over and he said, "Why are you here? Why did you come in here?" And I said, pretty much a short version of what I just told you about my dad. And I said, "I want to come in here because I want you to know that there are good people out there, and that if you do have the opportunity to get out, that people will meet your gaze. Maybe not everybody, but some people will, so you have to keep hope." Pretty much was my message. And I didn't say it like that because I wasn't trying to like spread a message or something. But I remember his response is what forever like changed my outlook on the years that I spent separated from my dad, because he like leaned back after I told him, and he was quiet. And then he said, "Can I ask you something?" I said, "Sure." And he said, "Do you hate your father?" He said, "Do you hate your father?" And I just didn't know what to say. I was so taken aback that I was pretty shocked. And finally I came around to say, no, because he's strong. And when he got out, he beat heroin addiction. And when he got out, he taught me that all it takes is 1 second, one bad decision, one misstep to like throw some stuff away, to throw things that are important to you away. And so from that moment forward, I had a connection with a lot of the guys in there that I didn't really understand. But for them, they were like family to me for the years that I've spent at UAS. So
yeah, thanks, Blake. Right on. Yeah, it's intense. And I have a quote here from a former outside student. He said, "Some students go on cultural immersion. This is justice immersion." And I really like that. So taking that, yeah, we should trademark that or something. Well, thank you all for the support. And incidentally, we have two outside students in the audience right now who are attending for the first time this semester, Devin and Kieran. So yeah, they got some. Unfortunately, this semester, twice the prison administration has canceled class on us. One, because of they weren't able to get the background checks done in time, and two, they said the gates were malfunctioning last week. So we've only had like 2 classes so far this semester. But I would like to bring up some of our community advocates now. I'd like to invite KJ up here, and Rosie and Christina. Do we have enough chairs?
Yeah, I think that's, you can pull more chairs.
Yeah, and so Christina Love is amazing. She is part of our Lion, the Juno crew that's part of this statewide effort to develop higher education access in our prisons. I call it the Juno crew. The Juno crew is composed of Christina, Kendall now, she used to be Fairbanks crew.
Yeah.
And Rick and Rosie. And then Rosie, you did Flying University last year, last semester. And then KJ has been in the prison, he's been in prison long, but he's been in the Flying University one time, and that was 2 semesters ago. He and his wife Peggy were able to come inside on our last day of classes because they had funded 2 of our scholarships. Northern Lights Church funded the other 2. And then KJ hooked us up with some scholarship opportunities last semester as well. And in fact, it's his money that has helped create the fund, the Flying University fund that we are developing and advertising for tonight. And so for our community advocates, I have 2 questions. Why is it important to work with prison populations as we think about building healthy communities? And what compels you toward advocacy for Flying University in our community? And what other issues is it related to for you? Right? It's not, so we know it's not just higher education, it's networked with other issues. So, you want to
Yeah. Holy. Okay. Let me lead by spirit. So for me and my experience, a lot of this has been trauma mastery, in that I come from 2 long generations of families that have been incarcerated. I am Aleut from Megigik, and I grew up in Chitna. And a lot of both of those villages were filled with people that struggled with alcohol and suicide and sexual assault and domestic violence and poverty and homelessness and incarceration. And I was 12 years old when my siblings and I placed my father in jail for sexually abusing us, and then later in my teens and adolescence and into adulthood, then I was in and out of incarceration. And I remember being released for drug-related charges, and my father had more rights as an offender than I did because of drug-related charges. And so there was part of this that was like, there's something gravely wrong with the system. And I remember the last time that that I detoxed in Fairbanks, and I just remember coming to, and we call it the unthawing process, the process of awakening to the world and feeling emotions, and for me it was starting to see life in color and all of the different ways that society had thrown me away. I could explain to you at what point I realized that I was invisible to the world, and at what point I realized that I was disposable, and all of the ways that I felt that oppression had affected me, and this journey where I found healing and liberation through education. The more I learned about systems, the more I learned about historical and generational trauma, and it was all of this like healing process for me. And part of that healing was that I wanted to make a way so that the next generation, so that my daughter won't have to know that, or so that as a community we're aware of what's happening to people, what's happening to the people that are sleeping under the bridges, and what's happening to people who are incarcerated. And that was a big part of it, was that people that I had spoken to didn't realize, that our prisons had become a warehouse for people who are mentally ill, who are physically unwell, who are struggling with substances, that every woman that I was incarcerated with had been sexually abused from a small age, had survived domestic violence. We didn't, most people don't know that this is how we respond to people who not only are vulnerable, but who are targeted. And so part of learning that for myself, and that paradox that you only keep what you give away, has felt really, really important. And it feels important, to continue to share that information. It feels that I feel like, for whatever reason, I don't understand why still to this day, you know, and when I walk downtown and I see people who are sleeping outside, I don't understand why I'm in a car and I have the job that I have and I have the life that I have, or why me and not them, and why not them and why not yet. And but it feels very, very important that I use the privilege and power that I have to be an extension of their voice, and and I feel that working with our whole community keeps the issues relevant. You know, that, you know, as right now in the political climate that we're in, that people understand the unintended consequences of some of these fear-based narratives that are being generated, and the very, very real consequences of that, and what happens in that, you know, that one policy results in many people dying, you know, and I think that those are stories that don't often penetrate, in that there's so much. We live within this world, but there are many worlds within this world. Even from poverty to middle class is a completely different language. Like Rick was talking about, how tattoos tell stories, and how there is it's just a completely different culture, that living in the street, or living in poverty, or in homelessness, and then into incarceration, and most people don't understand what it takes to move from that world into our world, you know, and even into middle class. And there's the battle of getting there, and then the battle of sustaining that, and it's absolutely incredible. And this work feels so important. It takes on many, many different lives of its own, but education for me has always been liberation. And I know that, like, even as I'm telling you my story, you know, I'm finding healing within it as well.
Thanks.
Wonderful. So I think, kind of jumping off of what Christina said about the privilege, when I was convicted of a felony and incarcerated, I was incarcerated about a year ago for a couple months, and I came from a very supported, very, you know, privileged, lots of education, you know, in my family and whatnot. And so going into that role for just a tiny bit of time, just dipping my toe into the other side, for me, it was kind of like just running towards a brick wall, right? You're like, you have all of these opportunities and you're doing all of these things in the community, and then all of a sudden you do some stupid stuff, and then what, right? So when I was released, after having been at Lemon Creek with the women in the Juliet dorm there, I still had support. I still had my community. You know, there were many bridges that I burned, but for the most part, I mean, the main thing that was steadfast in the most support that I had was UAS, was the faculty and my colleagues and my classmates and the staff here. Nobody, you know, people just looked, you know, like, didn't look at me that much different, because I was still a student and I was still a classmate or whatnot. And so I had known Saul for, I'm sorry, I feel a little hoarse, but I had known Saul, he was my professor, a couple years ago when I first started at UAS, and I knew about Flying University. It took me I was released in March, and it took me about 3 months or so, like the summertime, to really like kind of unpack what it was like to be incarcerated, and to have the guilt of like, I don't come from a place of struggle, you know, but at the same time, you know, I made choices that created struggle for myself. So it took me a little while to unpack it, and I asked Saul, I said, hey, can I be a part of, you know, Flying University? And he was very, very supportive about it. And after being incarcerated at Lemon Creek, just like Kendall was talking about, the opportunities for women there, and it's, you know, it's just space-wise and staff-wise, there's not a lot of space and opportunity for women here at Lemon Creek to be educated. When I was there, we had one sex ed class, and that the public health center comes quarterly. And so for the women that are, incarcerated for years and years and years, they're getting the same sex ed class 4 times a year. And that's their only education is, how to not get an STD. And so I could, from the relationships that I fostered while I was in there and have, sustained since I've been released, like it's kind of like a degrading feeling, and like Christina said, just being and using your privilege and your, whatever you may have as an extension of the voices of the, people that you come to be friends with and bring into your community and, in your heart. I think that's the main thing that compels me towards advocacy. Yeah.
I think that one of the most important things that we need to do is move to a restorative justice system instead of a punitive system. And I had hopes with SB 91 that that's the way we were headed, but it turns out that we're going a different direction now. And the fact that the governor has declared war on criminals is heartbreaking. We're not declaring war on injustice and poverty and a lot of the other reasons that people struggle. We're going to be very punitive about it, and we're going to lock people up, and we're going to have to build more prisons, and they'll probably be run by an international corporation. And there's not a lot of restorative effort. It's just not the kind of Alaska that I had dreamed about and that I want to be part of. And so you have to have a voice. You have to, and if the voice isn't out there, you have to create it and organize other people to understand what's at stake and what has to be done and what has worked and what hasn't worked. So, and I guess the other thing that kind of motivated myself is connections with people. I mean, I made mistakes in my life, and those mistakes, I don't believe, define who I am. And I would imagine that we've all made mistakes. And when I talk to inmates and coach them and talk to them, I assure them that the worst thing that they've done in their life does not define who they are. And they respond to that. I mean, it's like being treated humanely. And that's the nice thing about the Flying U, that you treat people humanely and as equals and with dignity. And that goes a long way in healing people. So, George Brown, the physician who passed away 7 or 8 years ago, was a strong advocate of healthy families. And he said, put the money, put the effort in having healthy families and healthy kids, and don't save the money to build prisons at the end of their life.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. Thank you all. Before we make a couple announcements and wrap things up, are there questions or are there conversations? Anybody want to say anything or?
I thought I might just add one more thing, since it was on my mind, but you had a question, so you go first.
I'm just a friend of KJ's and unfamiliar with all this, but y'all are truly amazing. It's a very impressive program you work in. But KJ pitched this project to a local chapter of Veterans for Peace. And it seemed a little remote from our central mission of opposing militarism and working for peace. I mean, I can sure see the connections all around me right now, but you know, as an organization, it's hard to make a connection. But somewhere I've read that veterans comprise an outside portion statistically of the incarcerated population. Am I right?
Mm-hmm. It's true.
I'm starting to see a connection. KJ didn't pitch that particular connection, but if I can learn a little more, I'll pass it on to the folks in our chapter.
I want to respond.
Yeah.
Thank you for asking the question and commenting. There was a man named Michael Alexander. There was a man named Michael Alexander. I'm wearing hearing aids and I can't hear myself. He was in the film. He was in his 60s. I hope he's alive. I'm not, but he's pretty sick and he's a little older. He was a vet. He went in there. We were playing Othello that you saw. And he was the black man in there. One of the first classes, he said, "I'm like Othello." What I mean by that is I'm black. I was a teenage soldier. I was abused. I married somebody of a different race. And he went, and I thought, I think he was 2 or 3 tours in Vietnam, front lines, survived. Then after that, he had PTSD. He said, "I'm like Othello, I have PTSD." And he explained Othello killed everybody because he had PTSD. It was part of the dynamic of what was happening. He was terribly abused in every way, as this man was. And they dropped him off in New York in a fairly violent area. And he had a flashback, a PTS flashback. He'd been killing for years. That's what the government trained him to do, is kill to survive. And they dropped him in a violent area. He apparently killed some people. I don't know the exact story. And he said, "And now I'm the rest of my life in here." This man was a very good man. They sent him down to a private prison in Colorado or Utah. I can't remember where it was. Colorado, yeah. And he met up for the first time with Bloods and Crips. He's an old man by this time. And he told him something. He said, "You know, you're a KKK wet dream, you guys. You kill more blacks than they do. They just love you." Well, you can imagine how that went over the Blood and Crips. It didn't go over these young people too well. And in a few days, they came back and they said, "You're right. We're making peace." And they did. And you know what the corrections, they said he was a gang leader and they punished him for doing that. Just to understand how this system doesn't work. And vets are very much part of this. Very, very much part of this. Yeah. Thank you, though. Yeah.
So is it just English and philosophy literature that you're trying to do classes for, or is there any effort to do like business, bring that in, or career readiness classes?
That would be great. It's sought after. In the late 70s, early 80s, there used to be a program called University Behind Walls. Is that what it was, Rick? Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Rick taught it for them. I've met, last November, I met the woman who started that program. and we were talking about, I asked her, how did you teach university classes inside Lemon Creek with just one tiny writing center with obsolete computers, can barely hold 10 people, and a learning center, which you saw in the video. And she said that between those two classrooms, there's a whole bunch of parole offices now, and those offices used to be classrooms. And so there just simply isn't the space to offer too much more. It's great that Rosie and Kendall are able to get in and do the women's writing workshop. But yeah, that is something that is sought after and very much desired in the prison. Yeah. So it'd be nice to develop that. We were, like KJ said, we seemed pretty poised at some really promising opportunities and moments before the current administration came up.
Can I just add, like, I mean, it is possible to start more classes. And Saul is totally right. There's really limited space, but they offered Rosie and I 2 different time slots. So we only took one. And also, I mean, this is kind of a plug, but we're looking for more teachers. And we're looking for women. We're working with women, and we're only bringing in women. So if you're a woman and you can be inspired by writing, then you should talk to Rosie or me, because we need more people.
Monday afternoons for just about 2 hours, like a longer lunch break. And if you know any women who like to read or are inspired by writing, send them our way too. We're trying to build a team of facilitators so that we can grow our writing workshop into something that's really sustainable and hopefully year-round.
Yeah, my role as chancellor, I just want to express my gratitude to all of you for sharing your stories and the work that you're doing, and to Saul for your leadership in this. I remember early on when I was first here at UAS, you told me of your desire to do this, and I thought, what a wonderful thing that would be for the community. And having lived, I lived in Fairbanks too, and I knew that there was a lot of variation from warden to warden, or prison official one to another, about whether they were supportive of these types of things. And I was gratified to learn that you were able to make those entrees and get this going. And I think our mission up there has community engagement in it, and I can't think of a better example of community engagement than this flying university. You've just given voice to it. So thank you very much for being here and for the work that you're doing.
Yeah, thanks for being here. And Rick's always been so supportive, but the joke I like to say is, I asked him permission one time.
The rest was history.
And never asked again. That's right. Yeah. Well then, I'll just, we can sort of end on some announcements here. So we are, our union, United Academics, negotiated our contracts. And one of the features of the new contract was that we had a pool of research money called Faculty Initiated Fund grant. And we, Sarah Stanley from UAF, who started Area 111X with Kendall, reached out to me and said, is this something we want to work together on? And I said, yes. And so we put together the application. We got our grant money. It was a really wonderful opportunity. And so we started networking Area 111X, Flying University. Now we have the women's writing workshop. And we created the Learning Inside Out Network, or LION. And the grant money was used to fund 2 think tanks, one in Fairbanks in November. And so we took the Juno crew, who I mentioned earlier, and that was phenomenal. So 3 days, a lot of good community networking, a lot of great ideas. And then in April 12th through 14th, we're gonna hold the Juno think tank. The Fairbanks think tank really allowed us to get together and create the network and create an identity and create a brand. and these kinds of things. And what we're hoping to do in April is actually institutionalize some of these efforts. It's kind of difficult in this political climate, this political moment. Kendall mentioned another slot opening up inside Lemon Creek. Well, the old DOC started a program called VIPs. And so community members could get credentialed and they could go in and bring their own programming in. Was that?
They took that away, didn't
They took that away, exactly. The new DOC just took that away.
Yeah, they started going backwards.
Yeah, and I tell you though, I'd like to encourage everybody though, because this is about community tonight, to keep pressure where we can, and don't let the current political climate render the prison system more invisible. I presented at San Quentin conference, a conference at San Quentin University. And at the end of the conference, I was talking to one of the inmates and I said, this is amazing what you've got going on here at San Quentin. It used to be one of the most historically notorious violent prisons in California. And today it's the prison that people want to go to because of all of the programming and opportunities. And he said it had nothing to do with the initiatives of the prison administration. It had everything to do with community members relentlessly knocking on the doors of the prison. So even in this political climate, we've got to maintain that kind of pressure. But if you're interested in any of this, you can register here, lion.open.uaf.edu. This is our website. That's right?
That's right.
Yes. Okay.
There's not registration up right now.
Okay.
But I can put it up tonight, so you could register tomorrow morning.
That's awesome. Yeah, Kendall designed our logo, and she brought a bunch of postcards here tonight. So if you want more information, it's right there.
It's right there.
The URL is right
you
there.
don't have to remember.
Awesome. So that's there as well. And then I just want to make the announcement that we have, Jesse and Shauna set this up. This is so great. Do you want to talk about it?
Yeah. So I think we need to give them all a round of applause. Thank you all. Thank you so much for being here and for everyone for joining us. I work in the Alumni Relations and Development Office, and my colleague Shauna O'Sullivan, who's our great fundraiser and development officer, has been working with Saul to develop the Flying University Support Fund. And so that is now ready to go, and we are able to take contributions, and this is going to really help support not only programming for Flying University, but it's going to help students in the form of scholarships and books and other materials and any other expenses, and just really provide a great an actual platform to give and to support all of your efforts. So we have giving cards in the back if you'd like to contribute. There's also a mechanism here if you want to contribute tonight. Just texting flying to 41444.
I'm trying it right now.
Are you?
Yeah.
Okay. And so I just want to thank all of you. I know Shauna and Saul gave a really powerful statistic about that I just wanted to share with you before we take off. But research proves that every dollar invested in correctional education saves nearly $5 in reincarceration costs over 3 years. So, I mean, with all of your efforts going in and, educating our incarcerated community members is just going to pay off so well, not only economically for, our communities, but it's just really providing a step forward for all of these incarcerated community members. When they get out, they have a path forward and they're already hopefully getting some college credit. So thank you, Saul, and thank you everyone, all of your work in Lemon Creek and beyond. So thank you very much for coming, and we hope you'll support us in any way with your time, or any contributions would be appreciated. So thanks.
Thank you. You want to see our Wordle real quick?
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah. So here, I just dropped it to myself. Here we go.
So I was gonna say, and I think this is important, that this isn't the first Flying University. And because you told me you'd talk about that sort of history and the lineage there.
Yeah, sorry.
That's a really interesting story as well.
Yeah, the original Flying University took place in Czechoslovakia. Respect, isn't that cool? Yeah, it took place in Czechoslovakia. My teacher, Martin Matustik, was a student of Václav Havel and Jan Patočka in Soviet-occupied Czechoslovakia. And in 1977, he signed he was student signatory of the Charter 77 Human Rights Agreement. And they used to meet for secret philosophy classes. And they called themselves the Flying University. That's right. And secret philosophy. And in 1978, their secret philosophy school, the Flying University, was raided by the police, and they were jailed and interrogated. And Jan Patočka, my teacher's teacher, died of interrogation wounds, and so he died a Socratic death. He died at the hands of the state for corrupting the youth. And so, first semester at Flying University, we were reading Havel, we were reading Levinas, we were reading these folks and talking about that history. And the next semester, my teacher, Martin Matustik, I brought him to UAS as part of the Spring Honor Symposium. And he and his wife, Patricia Huntington, went into the prison with us. And the guys are all really excited to meet them and asked him if we could name what we were doing in the prison, the Flying University. And he, as a student of the original Flying University, said, absolutely, I give my complete support to this because it is a direct continuation and it shares a direct genealogy with the original Flying University. So yeah, that's a fun story. Thanks for asking. All right, well, contact me if you need any information. And thank you all so much for showing up and being a part of this. So thank you.
Oh, what was it?
We were joking.